But first, the continued degeneration of the voice debate into repeated accusations of racism against no voters shows just how divisive and misguided this whole proposal always was. Whatever possessed the Prime Minister to think that entrenching race in our Constitution by giving just some of us an extra say over the government of all of us would unleash anything other than torrents of abuse. As soon as their campaign faltered, Yes advocates were always going to play the race card, as we've seen in buckets this week and again today. Today, Indigenous Affairs Minister Linda Burney complained about her treatment in the Parliament and said it's just unbelievably racist and bullying. Here she is.
We've just finished 2 weeks of really powerful. Yeah, just unbelievably racist, bullying.
Hey, you know what?
The way they've treated me is appalling.
Now, I bet she'll try and claim she didn't know she was being recorded on the campaign trail out there this morning with New South Wales Premier. But what you've just seen, well, that's a tactic that's used in politics. Set up the victim narrative, but don't do it in a press conference or air the allegation in the Parliament, because you might have to actually defend it. Now, Burney's been a frontbencher in both state and federal parliaments. Of course she saw the cameras. Of course she knew her comments would be picked up. And it all just adds to the sour grapes and bile coming from the Yes camp this week. If only it was just this week, though. Throughout the whole Voice debate, unfortunately, it's been the Yes campaigners that have specialised in personal attacks and aggression. Among Yes advocates, there's quite a few candidates, if I was going to give out a gold medal for bad behaviour, for anyone who has contempt for those who don't share their pro-voice views. Early on, well, you might have thought Noel Pearson would get the bad behaviour gold medal with this.
She's caught in a vortex that reminds me of Pauline Hanson 26 years ago, because Pauline Hanson got caught in a vortex, and it's a celebrity vortex. A celebrity vortex that's very compelling, that gets her out in front of people and it gets a lot of cheers. But it's also a redneck celebrity vortex. And their strategy was to find a black fella to punch down on other black fellas.
That, of course, was a diatribe delivered at Jacinta Nampijinpa Price. Pearson, who now says he's a reform bully, who wants to persuade no voters by embracing them in love, on the ABC this week, praised himself by asking, can a campaign of positivity for the future prevail against an absolute headwind, an absolute raging storm of fear and anger? Now, I'm sorry, Noel Pearson, but the anger and the personal attacks are all coming from the Yes side, and the chief culprit, this week at least, has been Voice advocate Marsha Langton, after she was exposed earlier for inferring that no voters were either racist or stupid, that she was just saying that their arguments were racist and stupid, as if saying you're not racist, it's just that what you say is racist is somehow okay. But then more footage emerged of her declaring that so-called hard no voters were just spewing racism.
The surge of racist nonsense is confined to a minority of Australians. Ordinary Australians are thinking, yes, of course I'm voting for the Voice, and that would be, you know, say 48, 49%. Then there's the hard no voters, and I'm hoping that they're about 20%, and they're the ones who are spewing the racism.
And today there's even more, with the resurfacing of Langton's 2018 dismissive smear against Senator Jacinta Price and her mother, former NT Minister Bess Price, that they were just, and I quote, the useful coloured help in rescuing the racist image of these Conservative outfits, and that Price's supporters were, and I quote again, rabid racists. Plus, it emerged that back in 2017, Langton, who, let's not forget, is one of the principal Aboriginal advisors to government for decades, called Australia a horrible, racist country.
fantasy world do they live in that would make them even ask the question? Of course Australia's racist. It's a horrible racist country.
That was Marcia Langton in 2017. She said, of course Australia's racist. It's a horrible racist country. She went on to say, it's only racist if you're a person of colour. It's not racist if you're white.
And again in 2019, saying that she had to sit down during the national anthem because the words were so offensive.
When I saw the NRL All-Stars game on Friday night, when our guys beat yours, sorry about that, I had to sit down during the Australian national anthem. The Maori people, with their treaty, and you know that we have none, were able to sing the national anthem proudly. I doubt that I know any Aboriginal people who know the words to ours, and in fact, if you read them, they're so offensive.
Treaty? They're all pretending treaty doesn't exist right now while they want you to vote yes to the voice. But there you have it. And Langton, you know, has been feted for years by the country she now says she often despises. Australia's been much better served by someone much less honoured than Langton, and that's Jacinta Nampijinpa Price. The hardest thing is to go against the noisy bullies amongst your own peers. But Price has consistently had the moral courage to do so. Her speech yesterday at the Press Club, it was a tour de force, especially her answers to questions. Her best response was to a loaded question where she simply denied that Aboriginal disadvantage was the result of a colonial past.
Do you believe the history of colonisation continues to have an impact on some Indigenous Australians?
No. I'll be honest with you, no, I don't think so. Positive impact, absolutely. I mean, now we've got running water, we've got readily available food. I mean, everything that my grandfather had when he was growing up, because he first saw whitefellas in his early adolescence, we now have. Otherwise, he would have had to live off the land, provide for his family, and all of those measures, which Aboriginal Australians, many of us, have the same opportunities as all other Australians.
And look at that cutaway there of her husband, a migrant, her mum, who's Aboriginal, a proud Aboriginal woman, and her dad, who she celebrates for her Anglo-Celtic heritage. But I think that the best part of yesterday was her fine riposte to this neo-Marxist concept of intergenerational trauma.
Would you accept that there have been generations of trauma as a result of that history?
Well, I guess that would mean that those of us whose ancestors were dispossessed of their own country and brought here in chains as convicts are also suffering from intergenerational trauma. So I should be doubly suffering from intergenerational trauma.
When asked about people dubiously claiming to be Indigenous, she offered up this uncomfortable truth.
If we actually chose to serve Australians on the basis of need and not race, those opportunists would disappear quick smart. And just...
She went on and said that there needed to be accountability in Aboriginal programs and that would come, she said, if we started treating Aboriginal people like Australian citizens.
If we keep telling Aboriginal people that they are victims, well, we are effectively removing their agency and then giving them the expectation that someone else is responsible for their lives. That is the worst possible thing you can do to any human being, is tell them that they are a victim without agency.
Honestly, for standing up against the misguided separatism that's made things such a mess in remote Australia, this woman is a national hero. Now, predictably, Bernie's response to Price's observation that material progress and justice for women has been good for Aboriginal people, well, that was offensive. Even though, much more than Bernie, Price has the lived experience of growing up and continuing to raise her family in some of Australia's most troubled places. And it's the yes case, of course, that still tries to claim the moral high ground, isn't it? As Bernie did today about victimhood. I mean, come on. They're not fooling me and I know they're not fooling you. If Bernie was any good as Indigenous Minister, she would agree to debate Jacinta Price as Price has repeatedly challenged her to do. And the very fact that Bernie keeps refusing, well, that speaks volumes about her competency in the portfolio and the utter weakness of the yes case.